Welcome to the very first edition of The Snap. Michael Heaver here alongside my co-host Patrick O'Flynn. Patrick, how are you?
I'm well, raring to go Monday morning, and we've had an interesting rash of opinion polls.
Oh, absolutely. And guys, you can rely on us here on The Snap not to duck any issue. And I want to start off with these polls, Patrick, and we'll dig into these in a second. I want to put something to you. Are we about to see the end of Sir Keir Starmer's leadership of the Labour Party?
I think it's bigger than that. I think we might be seeing the beginning of the end of the Labour Party, certainly as a potential party of government. I think Starmer is going to face a strong backlash from the Corbynite left. If he seeks to kind of patch things up with it, it'll cause an even bigger slump in his own ailing ratings. If he tries to take them on, it'll be divided party territory. I don't personally see that replacing Keir Starmer is going to solve Labour's problems. I think its problems are that its political coalition has fallen apart. But certainly the London commentariat, fake idea of Keir Starmer as some great success, Prime Minister in waiting, that's just collapsing. And even those London media commentators who love the idea of Keir Starmer, they can't pretend not to have noticed this now.
Absolutely. And by the way, guys, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell here on The Snap so you don't miss the next episodes. We dig through all of this stuff. Now, I want to start off with the Westminster voting intention poll from the 5th of April that came out. This was a Redfield and Wilton poll that showed the Conservatives had a 10-point lead at 44 compared to 34 for Labour, the largest Conservative lead from them since 15th of May 2020. And this has been followed up today with a devastating poll that shows a 7-point lead for the Conservatives in Hartlepool, the Hartlepool by-election. Of course, Patrick, Labour held on to that seat at the last general election. Just what would this mean if Labour cannot even hold on to the constituency of Hartlepool?
I think that would be absolutely devastating. The fact that it's even in play is devastating. We're at the beginning of mid-term now of this Parliament, and the whole history of by-elections and big swings and spectacular results, particularly in mid-term by-elections, it's always been all about the governing party losing, and then there's a load of chatter about, is this it for the incumbent prime minister, right? That's the way it goes. Governing parties struggle mid-term, and they come on stronger towards polling day in the general election, where people no longer have the luxury of a protest vote. They have to decide, between two main contenders, which would be the more tolerable to hold the reins of power, right? And yet, so if the Conservatives in mid-term, after this economic contraction, after various high-profile problems with the COVID response, if they're 10 points ahead nationally, and if they're on course to win a heartland Labour working class seat that even Jeremy Corbyn held on to in 2019, it's catastrophic. It explodes any thought that Labour could have a majority in the House of Commons, either under Keir Starmer or, I suggest, anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick, one of the things I certainly think is true is that we saw the previously red wall now looking pretty blue in terms of some of those seats the Conservatives took for the first time in the last general election. What I think this has led to in the Labour Party is a Labour Party that is even more dominated by MPs in London constituencies. I think it's led to a disconnect there that's grown even since the last general election. I also think, the sort of Corbynista MPs who like getting retweets on Twitter, I think Labour now is mistaking sort of support on social media, lefty leaning social media, for mass public support. You see the Kill the Bill protests, for instance, some disgraceful scenes, and you could go over after issue after issue after issue. But it seems to me, Patrick, that gulf between the London-centric Labour Party and its former traditional heartlands out across the country, that gulf is growing, not shrinking.
It's an absolute chasm, and it's not only London, it's London and the other big cities, Bristol, Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, and then there's in the East Midlands still the 3 Nottingham City seats, Leicester, and then you've got the sort of trendy lefty university seats, Canterbury, Brighton, Exeter, Cambridge, Oxford East, Norwich South, York, Lancaster, Durham, right? Those are the sorts of seats Labour holds now. And either the incumbent MPs there mistake the kind of ID politics mood in their own locality for a national mood, or they don't, and they just don't care. They're looking after number one. Normal Britain can tell that this party hates Britain. It wants to rejoin the EU, which is another poll that's just come out, you know. And so the Labour, the London Labour, the big city Labour, the university city Labour are just sort of wallowing in their own little microclimates politically, and they're not bothered. To me, they must know, and they're not bothered about trying to create a party that can form a government. They don't want to make those ideological compromises.
I mean, we're even seeing, there was a Labour source speaking to Alex Wickham of the Politico London Playbook today saying, oh no, we expect the Conservatives to win the seat. I mean, goodness me, if expectations now are so low within the Labour Party that they think the Conservatives should be winning Hartlepool, then it shows you the state of that terminal decline. But what I think might happen, Patrick, is that if the Conservatives do win the Hartlepool by-election, I expect, and by the way, that'll be accompanied, if that does happen, by an atrocious set of election results, I suspect, across the rest of the country for Labour. I then think you could well see a split row within the Labour Party. I think also possibly see Corbynista MPs challenging Keir Starmer's leadership, and they'll be saying, well, you're doing even worse than Jeremy Corbyn was in 2019.
They will indeed, you know, and they'll say tacking to the centre as they see it, you know, ditching their own, you know, even more radical left-wing agenda is what set Labour back. But, you know, I think the socially conservative, working class, provincial English vote has gone against both the current versions of Labour, both the out and out Marxist Corbynista Labour, but also the kind of London centrist dad, as they call themselves, which is actually pretty left-wing, strong rejoiner on the EU. That version of Labour, you know, liberal left lawyer dinner party circuit type Labour. So I don't think it's just the Corbynista version that's rejected. I think the Starmerite centrist dad version that the London media love so much, that's rejected as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you mentioned there the whole issue of the EU Brexit. I mean, the Mail on Sunday have got a YouGov poll of, I believe this is of Labour members. And of course, yes, it's important to differentiate between Labour Party membership nowadays and Labour Party voters. I certainly think, you know, for instance, in terms of the number of Labour voters that voted for Brexit, that was far greater than the number of Labour Party members. But in terms of Labour Party members, this YouGov poll of the Mail on Sunday shows 59% of Labour Party members think that Labour should campaign to rejoin the EU. Only 15% saying they shouldn't. Could that potentially, we hear from Starmer that that's not on the books as it stands, but you know, if there is a general election 2023, increasingly desperate Labour Party being potentially squeezed by the Green Party, by the Lib Dems, do you think we could see that in the next Labour manifesto, Patrick?
No, I don't actually, but I think that's almost irrelevant because Labour doesn't have any benefit of the doubt, particularly not Keir Starmer, on issues about the EU. Remember, Starmer was the Brexit spokesman who promised to respect the referendum result and then connived against it and ensured in 2019 Labour went into the election effectively proposing a second referendum and negating the votes of people in places like Hartlepool, where 70% almost voted to leave. So he's got no benefit of the doubt. And I just think the fact that by a ratio of 4-1, 59% against 15%, Labour Party members want to actually start actively campaigning for rejoin, that tells Britain all it needs to know about if there was ever a Labour government led by Keir Starmer. Of course it's going to prepare to rejoin the EU. It's not going to tell us that in advance, but he says one thing and does another. And we know which way the Labour Party membership leans, which way the overwhelming majority of Labour MPs lean. You know, they've ended up with an ultra Remainer as their candidate in Hartlepool, for instance. You know, people have got them taped on that. People aren't mugs. You can't trust Labour in power if you want Brexit to be honoured long term and given a chance to succeed. So I don't think he'll have it in his manifesto, but I don't think the omission of that is going to cut any ice with anyone, which is now a big majority of people who think we're better off out of the EU.
And finally, Patrick, you know, do you think Keir Starmer is actually going to be the Labour leader by the time of the next general election? Because I've got to say, and it's something I've been looking at for a while, I think people with this Hartlepool by-election are starting to, with that poll, are starting to realise how bad it is for Labour. You know, for instance, when you look at favourability ratings of voters in Hartlepool now, Boris Johnson has a 33-point lead over Keir Starmer. I've got to say, when you actually look at the research and the surveys of Keir Starmer's personal popularity compared to that with Boris Johnson, he is so far behind that, you know, it would not be a surprise at all if Labour did even worse on its current trajectory than it did at the last general election. And, you know, if things are as bad, you know, if the May elections are as bad as they appear to be at the moment for the Labour Party, I would question whether Starmer's going to cling on.
Well, you're certainly right. I expect Labour to lose, you know, Chesterfield, Wakefield, other remnants of its red wall at the next election. I just think the coalition has collapsed. The things Labour stands for are antithetical to the things voters in places like that believe. It's absolutely right. Starmer's personal ratings has collapsed. The more people have got to know him, the less they like him, you know, and his values. You know, so that's a terrible position. But then there are two factors on the other side of the equation. The first is you look around the Labour benches and do you see an alternative who could do notably better? Personally, I don't. A most likely scenario is Starmer clings on, but takes more and more hits from his own side, and Labour projects another disastrous level, disastrous face to Britain, which is divided party where people hate each other, and slides further in the polls as a result. I think we're seeing something major and structural about the end of the Labour Party as a potential party of government.
Well, look, guys, that was the first edition of the Snaps. So thanks so much for watching. What I'd like to know from you in the comments below is, who do you intend to vote for in May? And as I said, make sure you hit subscribe and the bell so you don't miss the next episode for myself and Patrick. Patrick, we're going to keep looking at all the very latest, today's politics now here on the Snap. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers, Michael.